Hello, and welcome to Sobercast. We provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast format. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into the virtual basket. Also, if you're a member of NA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, NAPOD. NAPOD features NA speakers and workshops in the same format as Sobercast. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for NAPOD, N-A-P-O-D, all one word, on any podcast player app, or go to napod.xyz if you'd like to listen online. Hope you enjoy the podcast and have a great day.
I just want to say that he's been a part of my sobriety since I first came in, and the longer that I'm here, the more I appreciate all of the hard work the people that have stayed here for so long do. I appreciate your sobriety and being a friend to me and my family, and everybody. Just please welcome David from Tulsa.
Hi everybody, my name's David, an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is January 2nd, 1981. And for that period of time, I am very grateful, and I appreciate Jennifer giving me a call and inviting me to participate in your meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a long time when I got to AA that I didn't think it was a privilege. I didn't think anything about it. I thought this would be a place I'd only be for a few days, get the heat off, and get back out there. I had things to do. And that was a little over 22 years ago, and I don't think I would have ever imagined myself when I came in that I would have volunteered to wear a suit coat on a 90-degree afternoon and stand up and tell you embarrassing things about my life. And yet today I recognize and realize that these are the very things that allow me to be given the life that AA has given me. I think it's real important. You know, there's a lot of people that shared on the birthdays tonight. I want to wish all the people that have had their birthday, Tim, Scott, Daniel, Leslie, and Jamal, happy birthday. Happy birthday in Alcoholics Anonymous. For a long time, my parents didn't understand that today, my AA birthday is the most important day that's on the calendar. And not because it's about me, but it's about the day that for whatever reason God gave me my life back. I was born on the second day of August, 1960. And from that day to the second day of January, 1981, I screwed it up. And by the time I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, man, I was one flaky person. And I did not understand that I suffered from an illness. I did not understand that I had alcoholism. In fact, if you would have asked me, if you would have hooked me up to a lie detector test on the second day of January 1981 and said, "Are you alcoholic?" I would have said no, and I don't believe the machine would have registered any different. Because I didn't know what I suffered from until I was here long enough, and you described and explained to me what the disease of alcoholism was. I didn't see Jamal when he was 12, but I 12-stepped him when he was 14. It didn't work. Yes, it did. I stayed sober. I stayed sober because I didn't want to do what Jamal was doing. I had already been doing it a long time before I 12-stepped him on that day, and 5 years ago, he walked into the Going to NA Links group like Byron described, walking with the aid of a cane because somebody tried to fillet him. You know, when you steal somebody's money, they'll try to fillet you. Whether you're on the north side or the south side or any other side. They don't, you know. People found out in AA people want their money back. I'll tell you the thing that we read How It Works tonight, and when Jason was reading How It Works, there's a paragraph that's becoming more and more important to me because I think it's the difference between the people that are truly alcoholic. And if there's one thing that I'm grateful for today, that I know that I am an alcoholic. I'm what the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous describes as a real alcoholic, and I'll try to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But I'll tell you that paragraph that Jason read that is getting more and more clear to me why people who are real alcoholics come here and don't stay. And I'd really like you to understand that probably most of this room will not be here a year from now. Whether you're alcoholic or not, most of the people sitting in this room are going to find a reason to not be here. And today the paragraph that Jason read is the reason why. It talks about those who do not recover. See, one of the things that I thought here is everybody just loves each other. We're all just going to be happy. We're just going to, sooner or later the clouds are going to lift and I'm going to look down and I'm going to see the little circle, the yellow brick road, and I'm just going to have to follow it and then I'm going to get wonderful. And that, I don't know, that never happened to me. I don't know if you're on the yellow brick road, but get off if you are, because it ain't real. But the paragraph that Jason read was this. It says, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Then it went on to say this. Usually those people who are constitutionally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living, and this is the word I hate, which demands rigorous honesty. See, if you were to demand anything of me, I'll fight you. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I grew up defying everything, not even knowing it. I was rebellious, and I didn't know it. I hated everybody that wanted to tell me what to do. And now I come into this place supposedly looking for help, and you tell me you demand something of me. And if you demand anything from an alcoholic, you're in for a fight, whether you're sober or not sober. And yet this program says it demands something of me if I want to be well. Well, before I made that decision, I had to find out who and what I was, and you helped me with that. And really, I wasn't even looking for your help, and you gave it to me anyway. You helped me find out what I suffer from, and it's this thing called alcoholism. And if you're new here tonight, if you're just getting started in AA, or if you've been here for a while and you're not sure why, I want to describe to you what our book talks about and how it defines the illness alcoholism. Because the first thing that I had to do was find out whether I was one of you or wasn't one of you. And I'll tell you, if you're not one of us, you're wasting your time here with a bunch of other people that just seem to be happy about being sick. And that's crazy. So the first thing it says, we alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. So from that, I've been helped to understand that there really are two types of alcoholics. That's all we got here. We've only got two types of alcoholics. We got some women alcoholics, and we got some men alcoholics. And that's all we got here. We don't have little ones and fat ones. Because I tell you, if there was fat AA, that's where I'd be. You know? Because you skinny people don't understand fat AAs. North side alcoholics and south side alcoholics. Rich alcoholics and poor and smart and stupid. All we got's men and women. That's it. That's all we got here. It goes on further to say that on the first page of chapter 4, probably the best description of the illness alcoholism, more than anything I've ever read. It helped me more to determine if I was you or wasn't one of you than any other page in the book. It says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. And the key word in there is entirely. I could quit. I could not stay quit. I quit a lot. I vowed and prayed, and I put hands on a TV because the preacher inside it said to put your hands on the TV. But I always found a reason to take the next drink. And then the second part of that statement was, or while drinking you find you cannot control the amounts you take, you're probably alcoholic. I'm glad I'm in a place where you read the book, because the information is in there. If you're not sure, it's kind of a silly place to be, coming to a place where you're not sure why you're coming. And I'd like to alleviate some of that confusion, because I know we don't try to hide anything around here. This is Alcoholics Anonymous. That means in the room there's going to be some alcoholics. And what we try to help each other with is how to recover from the illness, Alcoholics Anonymous. The doctor said there was also one other thing, and I understood this, because I'll tell you, this phrase that the doctor's opinion uses, I'll tell you, if you're talking to a real alcoholic, they understand it. If you're talking to a non-alcoholic, I don't know if you've ever seen, when you're trying to communicate, when you're talking to, if you've ever seen a dog and you're trying to say something to the dog and the dog kind of, you try to describe the phenomenon of craving to a non-alcoholic, and that's the look you're going to get. Huh? See, I have the phenomenon of craving. I didn't know it, but the doctor's opinion says that that's the thing that separates me as an alcoholic from the non-alcoholic. And in fact, it says people who are hard drinkers never get it. Hard drinkers can find a reason to stop and stop. Moderate drinkers can find a reason when they want to stop, they stop. They could take a drink and, oh, I better not now, I'm driving later. I don't get that. You haven't lived until you have a beer in between your legs. Try it. Oh, that's good driving. I drive fine. No problem. What I found out, though, is that because people who came before me in AA that were students of our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, when I got there, they could share that information with me. So if you're new here tonight and you don't know, find somebody who's a real alcoholic that's worked those steps. Ask that guy to help you find the information in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I'll tell you, if you're not sure, this is a tough place to be. If you're not sure, I don't really know why you're here. But I'll tell you one thing. What I have also found out is very, very few people come to AA by mistake. Even not trying, they don't come here by mistake. You know what? I've never one time thought to myself, I think I'm going to run down to Alcoholics Anonymous just to see what those people are like. I never one time came here on a volunteer basis. And yet when I found out what I am, who I am, and what I suffer from, most importantly when I found out that you have the answer. And I found the one person, and that person I started calling sponsor. And for whatever reason, that person that I have today as a sponsor, and I've had 4 men as my sponsor, and 3 of them have died. Now I'm on the 4th, and I'm trying to keep him alive. All right. But I've had 4 men as sponsor, and the common characteristic of each one of those 4 men is this: is their voice has always been louder than the committee that I have stuck between my left ear and my right ear trying to kill me. And I didn't know that that's a big part of my problem. I grew up in Chicago. My father played professional athletics. He was in the Chicago Cubs minor league system. Blew his arm out before he got any further. But as growing up, I've got 2 older brothers, and sports was always a big part of our family. And right away, I thought, oh, man, I'm different. My 2 brothers were pretty good athletes. The middle brother was always the best athlete. He was a letterman in baseball, basketball, and football in high school, and I was fat. I don't run very fast. I'm gravity challenged. When I try to go up, I come down very fast and hard, and I take up a lot of space. I'm on record in a couple of places for the longest singles in baseball. I mean, I hit 400-yard singles because, man, that from the distance from home plate to first base, it's a long way. Went out for the football team in high school my freshman year because that's what Braves do. Braves go out for football. So I go out for football, and then right away I found out I had a problem with my back. I've got a big yellow streak right down the middle of it. I don't like getting hit. Some guy wants to run, hey, take off, buddy. Coach frowns on that. When they find out about that, they put the fat guys in one place on the line. Right? You're just stand there and take up space. So that's what I did. And I remember about the last week of football practice, the coach comes up to me and goes, Bray, for a guy like you who's been to practice every single day this year, you're without a doubt the worst football player I've ever seen in my life. He was right, man. I stunk. So I took up golf. Now, this is an interesting concept for a guy like me. I found out pretty quickly that I played golf very well. And it's a great sport for a guy like me. When you hit it, you don't have to run after it. You just walk after it. And I've also found out a little bit later that when you're about 2 or 3 holes away from the clubhouse, you can light up a cigarette and walk after it. That's a perfect sport for a guy like me. I became pretty good pretty quick and started playing the game seriously. By the time I was 18, I was a 1 handicap, and I was playing in some tournaments around the Chicago area, but at the very same time, I started drinking. And little by little, and what I have found is, little by little, alcoholism has taken from me, either by me volunteering to give it away, or stripping me from the very things that I cared the most about. Because sooner or later, if you're an alcoholic, and I didn't know this when I took my first drink, but sooner or later, if you're a real alcoholic, the alcoholic of the type the book describes, you don't have any power. The book says that I have lost the power. It says that my human resources as marshaled by my will were insufficient. Then it uses this phrase, they failed utterly. I didn't want to be the person I was becoming. I wanted to not get up and need to drink to get out of the house, and I'm 18 years old. I didn't want to be the person that when I wake up in the morning, I have to try to piece together the nights before. And I have to try to remember who I lied to, what lie I told you. See, because if you're like me, you have to lie about how much you drink. You have to lie about how much money you're spending. You have to steal money and then lie about how much money you're spending. You have to remember who you owe and who you stole from and try to not be there at the same time. And man, that's a tough life. People, we don't have any willpower. I'll differ to it. I'll argue that point. We got a lot of willpower. It takes an awful lot of willpower to stay out there doing the things we do for as long as we do them, knowing what the consequences are. So I graduated high school, and I got to this junior college, and I was still trying to play golf. At this time, it was the only time from the time I started drinking to the time I got to AA that I put any type of long-term sobriety together. And this was the longest stint I ever put together. I put 94 days together of not drinking while I was trying to play golf. And it was the hardest 94 days of my life. By the 94th day, my head was about to spin off. Now, during that time, I had won a college golf tournament. I had some scouts watching me, and I had an opportunity. The book said I had arrived. I had some opportunities, but I needed to drink, and I didn't know it. And I took a drink, and every opportunity I had went away. By the time I finished my sophomore year in college, no more scouts were there. By the time I finished my sophomore year in college, I couldn't break 75. I barely broke 80. And when you're trying to play on, competitive golf, it just don't make it. And so I just said, well, the heck with it. I don't need it anyway. I threw it away. So I started drinking. I drank all the time. I graduated from this junior college, and I don't know how, because I took some classes that I failed, and they let me go anyway. I love our educational system. Fail, okay, pass. F means pass. That's great. I love that. So I go to Northern Illinois University, which is in a town called DeKalb. It's about 45 miles kind of northwest of Chicago, and it's basically in a cornfield. And without Chicago, Illinois is Iowa. It's really all it is. All right? And DeKalb is really just right in the middle of the cornfield, and they plowed out a bunch of the acreage and put up the university and some bars, and that was DeKalb. And it was really the greatest drinking platform for a guy like me. It was the very first time I was on my own. I'm 19 years old, and for the first time I'm on my own. And I drank like I was on my own. I don't believe the book says, people say, well, I never drew a sober breath. Well, I drew sober breaths, but I didn't want to be sober long. I'll tell you two quick stories. One of the best holidays on a college campus is Halloween. It's really, you can just dress up and just be goofy as you want to be, and for an alcoholic, it's perfect disguise. And so in 1980, there was a movie that came out called The Warriors, and it was a movie about gangs. And so a bunch of the thugs that I was running around with, we all dressed up as one of the gangs in the movie The Warriors called the Baseball Furies, and we painted our faces red and white, and we wore baseball uniforms, and you had to carry a bat. I didn't have a bat, so I went into my closet, and I took out the 4-foot oak pole, and I went to the party. And by this time when I drink, there's only one of three things that are going to happen. When I drink alcohol, I either run out, black out, or pass out. And that's it. Those are the only three endings when I start to drink. And this is a night that I black out. And the story that was told to me is that a group saw me about 3 o'clock in the morning walking in a direction that wasn't in where my house was, and they grabbed me and they took me to the apartment that we were living in. And when I got into the apartment of our downstairs neighbors, the thing that they told me was, as I walked in, I only had about that much of my closet full left, and they said, ooh, I was hurting people. And I don't remember any of that last night. So for about the next 3 days, I was fairly scared. I started looking in newspapers for stories. Most universities have a college paper. They normally list all the crimes of the nefarious thugs. I'm looking for a story in there about some guy dressed up in a baseball uniform with a painted red and white face hitting people with a closet pole. And I don't find anything. And after the third day, I do what I've done with every episode of my life like that. I dismiss it. If they were there, they deserve it. And I just stop thinking about it and I start drinking again. Our apartment was, I don't know if you can have an alcoholic apartment, but ours was close. If there was ever such a thing as an alcoholic apartment, we lived in one. The kitchen, any plate, glass, cup, saucer, silverware, there was nothing in a cupboard. There was nothing neatly stacked. It was all on the counter, covered with various lengths of food. Some of it may be fresh. Some of it may be a year old. I don't know. It was bad. Some of it floated in the sink with the gooey water. In our apartment, paper products, they all interchanged with each other. You could use one of 3 paper products for any other source. Paper towel, Kleenex, or coffee filters. Any one of them could be any other one of them. Whatever you needed, you had to grab. The carpet we had so many get-togethers. Everything that was humanly possible spilled or extracted was on that carpet. I won't go any further other than just to tell you it had a nice little glaze and that kind of alcoholic crunch to it when you walked across it. One morning in late November, I came to and my face was in the carpet. And actually I was trying to get an education there. And I had an intuitive thought that I had an art test. I flunked art that year. I look out our window, which didn't have any curtains, that we threw a sheet over it. So I look out the window, and the sun was shining, so I put on my uniform of the day, which consisted of a T-shirt that I'd cut the sleeves off. By this time, not only am I drinking, but I'm doing other things, so I'm svelte. I'm weighing about 165, and I don't remember what that feels like, but I put on my T-shirt, which I had cut the arms off of, and it proudly proclaimed across my chest, "Free me." And on the back, it had a big fist. It's kind of my swan song. And I put on my shorts, and I put on my thongs, and I grabbed my number 2 pencil because I had a test, and I walked to class. And when I got to class, it was in a kind of an auditorium style, one of those deals where a lot of goofy people sit there and take your test. And when I got to class, I noticed something remarkably different from all of you compared to me. All of you were in heavy winter clothing. I'm not talking about windbreakers. I'm talking about the heavy coats. And back then, it was the big Montana cow coats, man. There was the big things like that, and the scarves and the pullover mask where just the eyes show, and big gloves. And as I'm walking up the aisle in my T-shirt and my shorts and my thongs, I heard one guy go, "What does that guy know that we don't?" And they just walked up the aisle, and I took my test, or flunked my test that day, and walked home. And the thing that I noticed was it was a lot colder going back than it was coming. So I get out of school that year, and I come home for the holidays, and by this time, my parents, they had doled out all the money they could dole out, and there's 100 stories of me abusing the rights that a child has living in his parents' home. I don't know how many stories I could tell you. I'll just tell you the fact that by the time I got home from that semester, they had had enough of their son. And between the Christmas holiday and the New Year's holiday, my parents were invited out to one of my dad's parties, company's party, and they went. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity to have one of those little Hallmark moments where you call about 3 or 4 close friends, and you sit by the fire, and you drink Michelob, and you go, "It doesn't get any better than this, baby." You know, unfortunately, I invited 4 people, and it's like 98 showed up. And one more time, my parents' home is laid waste by this gang. And this is a night that I pass out, and I pass out over in the corner, and I'm a heap, and my parents' possessions in their home is destroyed. And, you know, you come to in a place like that, and you try to put it back together, you try to make it look as presentable as you can, and you can't, because how can you put stuff back that was supposed to be there, that isn't there now? And the very next day, you know, I had the last talk that I had with my father prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, and the last thing he said to me is he looked me in my eye and he said, "You know, Dave, with a son like you, I don't need any enemies." This wasn't the 1st or the 10th or the 25th or the 50th time that I had abused the right to live in his home. I don't know how many times that he had come home and seen me passed out or drunk or lying in a puddle of my own vomit. And I'm 20 years old. And for whatever reason, on that day, the 2nd day of January of 1981, he looked at me and he said, "You know what, we're done. We can't stand it. We want you gone." And then he asked, "You know, what is it? What do you need? I mean, what do you want to do?" And the words that came out of my mouth at that moment had never come out of my mouth ever before. And I simply said on that day, I said, "If I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to need help." And I don't know where that came from, because I've never, ever asked for help ever before. Because that's the way we were raised. You don't ask for help. So they whooshed me off to a treatment center. And treatment has nothing, not one single thing to do with my recovery. They dried me out. They gave me my $10,000 big book and whooshed me to a halfway house. I don't know what it was halfway to or from, but I lived in this halfway house for about 4 months, and it had nothing to do with my recovery other than the fact that they made you go to AA meetings there. I didn't start recovering until I started working your steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Until I started working your 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't have what you have. I don't get the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in a treatment center, in a counseling session, or taking Prozac. I get the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous when I start working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for that, I found out I need a guide. I don't know about you, but the first time I read the book, I didn't understand much. I read Bill's story probably 3 times, and I swear the only thing I got out of it, Bill's story is they played golf. That was it. The one thing I learned in that treatment center is most people don't make it here. That's the one thing I learned in that treatment center, in that halfway house. Most people don't make it. I got to be buds with one of the guys living there. In fact, he was probably the closest friend I'd ever had from the time I was 14 to that moment. Because I'll tell you what I also found out was drinking buddies are just that. When the booze is gone, you don't have many of them left. And so this guy and I, we were pals in AA. We would always sit in the back row and make fun of all the people doing all the work. What a bunch of fools. And then about 3 months, this guy got drunk. And I went over to his house to save him. Not a smart move. And I knocked on his door, and I got into his apartment. He was sitting in a recliner, and he had a case of crushed beer cans and that nice glow about him. And I asked him if he wanted to go to a meeting, and he said no. He asked me if I wanted a beer. I wasn't real happy about my sobriety at this point, and beer didn't sound too bad. And for whatever reason, I said no, and I walked out of his apartment. I haven't seen him since. But I went to an AA meeting that night knowing that AA doesn't work. I went to an AA meeting that night to resign from Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know that you just don't come anymore. So the guy that was leading the meeting was some type of discussion meeting, and I was preparing my exit speech. And I had eloquent language back then. I'd just come off the street, and so most of the language I had consisted of 4-letter words and long phrases beginning with mother. And the guy knew that I was probably not a good candidate to ask to share on the topic that night, and I couldn't have told you what the topic was, but he ran out of people and he had to call on me. And for about the next 4 or 5 minutes, I'll unleash a roll of profanity and disgusting verbiage in a meeting of AA that should never allowed to have been taken place. I told you all what a bunch of losers you were. I told you that your silly program doesn't work. I'm cleaning it up here. I told you you're a bunch of mindless sheep. Your program doesn't work. AA doesn't work. My buddy's drunk. And oh, by the way, I want my money back. I feel like I had any in there. You know? Most of those meetings I'm trying to figure out how to scam the basket. So finally the guy that was leading the meeting did something very important. He said, "Dave, shut the hell up. We're tired of listening to you." He goes, "Dave, I really want to tell you one thing, really a couple things, because this may be the last night we see you. And so before you go, I want you to know a few things about what's true and what's not true in the meetings of AA. Number one, the reason your buddy's drunk tonight isn't because AA doesn't work." He said, "The reason your buddy's drunk tonight is because he chose not to work Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, but that's secondary to the thing I really want you to understand here, Dave. He goes, I want you to look around the room. I want you to look at the people sitting next to you. I want you to look at everybody sitting here. He goes, there's two types of people sitting in the meeting tonight. There's some good examples of AA, and there's some bad examples of AA. Now pick the one you want to be and shut up. I had my first resentment in Alcoholics Anonymous. How dare him? How dare him talk about that? And what I have found in the next 22 years after that meeting is he was right. There's good examples of AA and there's bad examples of AA. And I'll tell you what I will watch in my group, and I bet you watch the same thing in your group. About 10% or 15% of the people do 90% of the work around here. And I'll tell you the difference. The people that are doing the work are the people that are desperate. People that are doing the work are the people who want to be sober. And the people sitting on the outside watching everybody else doing work, still trying to figure out whether they belong here or not. And my prayer for you is if you're one of the people not working, I pray that you find out you belong or get out of the way. Because this isn't a place where my first conception of AA is we should just all get along. We should just, isn't this a place where we just love each other? Where we just get along? God, you want me to do what? You want me to be there when? I thought this was about everybody gets to do what anybody wants, just don't drink. Put a plug in the jug and don't drink and be happy about it. Well, I know one thing, I hadn't had a drink and it wasn't any better than it was when I was out there trying not to drink out there. And what I found out was, I finally found a man who started talking and teaching me about Alcoholics Anonymous. And what he taught me is that not drinking has no effect on alcoholism. Not drinking, in fact, makes alcoholism worse. And in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, in that first section of our book, the doctor's opinion, it describes me sober. Irritable, restless, and discontented. And it says, and I'll stay that way until I can experience the sense of ease and comfort. It doesn't say I get ease and comfort by drinking. I don't get ease and comfort. I get a sense of it. And that is the delusion that I'm under. The delusion is when I drink, things get better. I don't have denial. I have delusion. I believe lies. And most of them are the ones I've told myself. I believe every lie I've ever told myself. Because if at the other end of that lie is a drink, it's all worth it. And if when I wake up in the morning and I have to piece together that night or that day before and those people I've lied to or hurt or harmed or committed some act of violence on, it doesn't matter because it was worth it. Because for that moment, I have shut off the insanity of my brain. And now you come here and say, don't drink, and I want to hit you. What do you mean, don't drink? It's the only thing that makes me allowed to live somewhat happy. And what my sponsor today tells me is, unless I learn to live with some degree of contentment and happiness with you and with me and with God, I'm going to drink again. Period. That's alcoholism. And the only way I'm going to find a way to learn how to live happy with you and with me and with God for an alcoholic of my type, and I'm assuming alcoholics of your type, is those 12 steps, and I didn't realize it. In the same paragraph in the doctor's opinion, it gives us the either or. And he puts it in plain English. It says, if a guy like me doesn't experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of my recovery. It's just that simple. Now that kind of sounded mystic. Psychic change. How do you go get one of those? Do I got to call Miss Cleo? What I found out is I had to call my sponsor. And my sponsor started laying it on the line. About a year sober, I moved to Norman, Oklahoma. That was in 1982, and I fell into a group called the Big Book Group, long before Sheila got here. And I'll tell you something, what I found is I found a place where they had things I had not seen before, and that I was anti. They had structure and discipline, and they had work the steps and call your sponsor and do all these things. And I turned myself into a sponsor. Actually, he kind of beat the crap out of me, and for the first time in my life, I understood step 1. And I worked the steps, and it was the very first time I went through the inventory process of steps 4 and 5, and I told another human being my life's story through resentment and fear and the problems in sex, and I told them it all. And the best description I've ever heard of an inventory was, when I'm out there in active alcoholism, I don't know how to handle life. And I start collecting crap. And I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know how to process it, so what I do is I just ignore it. And you carry enough of it for a long time, you got to drop it. So I open the back door and throw all the crap in the back and shut it. And I did that for all years of my drinking. Now I go over to my sponsor, he says, write the inventory. I go, I don't know how. He goes, so he comes over and he opens the drapes to the backyard, and I look out there. My backyard's full of crap. Man, it's bad. It's a lot of crap back there. The inventory is simply this. You take that big pile of crap and you make a lot of little piles of crap, and you take little red flags and you put it, resentment, fear, sex, resentment. Now I look out there, and there's, instead of one big pile, there's a lot of little piles with a lot of red flags, and they're all labeled. Now the 5th step is getting somebody stupid enough to go out in the backyard with you while you tell them about every little pile. When I was done talking to me about my piles, I was sure that I'd get to 1 or 2 of those piles, and he'd say, man, Dave, you know, AA, it's full of really the scum of the earth, but we didn't have people like you in mind, and you got to go. I was scared to death that he would tell me that, and he never did. In fact, I got to some of my worst piles, and he told me about his worst piles. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I belonged. For the first time since I can't remember when, I knew I was home. Your sign above the podium happens to me when I engage in your program of recovery. Now, that's not it. I just don't go now skipping down the rest of the yellow brick road. He said there's a lot of work from here on. We're going to have to try to clean up this. Just because you've labeled these piles doesn't do anything. We've got to get rid of them. We have to amend them. Our steps 8 and 9 say we have to change. And what I have found out is that's a demand. I either change or I go back out and try it all over again. I either have to change the way I live or I have to drink again. Because if I keep doing the same silly actions and I do the bad actions, then that day, whether I drink or not, I wake up with the same feelings. Shame, guilt, remorse. I'll tell you, the harder inventories are the ones I'm doing now sober. I don't have anything to blame it on, except just being selfish and self-centered. Page 62 describes me, and I didn't realize it. How can a book written 21 years before I was born have the answer to my life? And since I've been here, what I have found is there has never been a problem I've come up against that, from the doctor's opinion to the end of page 164, hasn't had the answers to my life. And that man wrote out exactly what my problem is that I'm selfish and self-centered, that I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And my sponsor adds a 6th, self-serving. And that is the root of all my troubles. I have this constant companions, my very own 6-pack of self. And they're with me today. You just look around, I'm grabbing them. Most of it's self-pity and self-delusion. And I'm trying to figure out how to not carry it. I wish I could just put it down and be altruistic from here the rest of my life. But I'm an alcoholic. And it seems like when I go to bed and I start the next day, it seems like in between when I went to sleep and woke up the next morning, somebody sneaked in my room and jabbed me right in the keister with a big old syringe of self. And there I get up. And I know that's true because the first thing I think about when I wake up is Dave. How you doing, Dave? I'm doing good. How are you? Wonder what's in store for us today, Dave. I don't know, Dave. Let's go find out. God, I hope it's money. It's hard to live inside my head. I don't know if you've got a head like mine, but if you do, man, I feel bad for you. The only thing that keeps me somewhat sane is I go to 4 meetings a week. On Monday night, Wednesday night, Friday night, and Saturday night. And that ain't enough, so on Tuesday night, all the people I sponsor call. And just for good measure, on Thursday night, they all call back. On Sunday, I gotta go the whole day with Dave and my wife, and we try to just be nice to each other so we just don't think about ourselves. I don't know about you, but I've got a head that just, it's like a vortex of self. It just sucks in on itself. And I can't stop it. I don't have the power to stop it. So now what does the book say? You know, we've got these inventory steps, 4 through 9, or 4 to 5, then we have the amends steps, 8 and 9. I went about trying to make amends. The book says in the promises on that page of the promises, it says these things sometimes, they happen sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly, but they always materialize. I went and made amends to my mom and my father, and it wasn't right away that they took them. In fact, through the years, what I had to do is I had to watch. And on my 15th year AA birthday, my wife got sneaky and she flew my mom and my father in for my 15th year AA birthday, and they got to see Alcoholics Anonymous at its finest. They got to see AA well represented, and they got to hear some of these AA folks talk well about their son. And my mom cried. And on the Sunday afternoon when we took my parents back to the airport, my father pulled me to the side. This is 15 years after I got sober. And on that afternoon, on Sunday afternoon, he pulled me aside and he said, you know, Dave, there was a time when I thought maybe you had a promising golf career, but after this weekend, I know that you've been called to a higher order. And my relationship with my father has been, from that day to this day, we end up every single call. A man that looked at me 22 years plus ago and hated the son, what I had become. He had hated what alcoholism, he didn't know what it was, but he hated what I had become. And today we call each other, and when we end our phone calls, it's with Dad, I love you, and Dave, I love you. And how do I pay that back? My mother suffers from the disease of alcoholism, and I thought we were going to watch her die. And what ended up happening was through a series of circumstances, one afternoon my father called and said, we just stuck your mom in a treatment center. And that was in January of 1993. And in January of 1994, I stood up in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Sarasota, Florida, and I got to hand my mother her 1-year sober medallion. And in 1998, I stood up in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Sarasota, Florida, and I handed my mother her 5-year sober medallion. And last January, my mother and my father came to Tulsa, and I stood up in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I handed my mother her 10-year sober medallion. My father got up in that meeting, and he thanked Alcoholics Anonymous for his wife and his mother back, or his wife and his son back. I'm known in my area, I'm some fanatic about AA. And to that I plead guilty. I'll tell you the one thing that I know today is there's a power in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's a power in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous that is undeniable and unmistakable if you join us. And what I have found is the only people that seem willing to join us are the people who have had enough. For the last, it'll be 18 years in August. For the last almost 18 years, I've been married to Susan. And we met on AA campus. And we got married on the 3rd day of August in 1985. And from that August through this year, every year at the Canyon Conference, for those of you that you attend, there's a little chapel on the grounds. And we've given pretty much our life to AA and Al-Anon. I sponsor a bunch of guys in AA, and she sponsors a bunch of gals in Al-Anon, and our home is always full of you. And we've got a big room and our piano room, and it's full of all your pictures. It's full of all our moments in time where you've given us the privilege of sharing your life with us. And our life is rich. And our parents, they don't understand. Our families don't understand what we do. They come into town, we say, here's the remote. See ya. We're going to an AA meeting. Susan was talking about Tammy's family came in, and we don't know them. We just hand them, here's the remotes, here's the keys, here's the refrigerator, Have at it. We're going. Our lives are full because of you. Every year we go into the chapel on the grounds of the Canyon Conference and we renew our vows. We stand up we say a 3rd step prayer on our marriage every single year, and we stand up in that little aisle and we take our wedding rings off and we remarry each other. And we realize today that God's the reason that we're together. We realize for whatever reason God put Susan and I together, and that we, in essence, offer our life as a married couple to this magnificent fellowship. I don't know of anybody who lives a better life than I do. And you've given it to me. Everything that I have is what you've given me. And the only price tag is that I'm willing to give it back. One of the men that was my sponsor was a man by the name of Jim Shaw, and he taught me more about being an AA member than any man that I've ever met. And we had to watch Jim die of cancer, and the last conversation I had with Jim prior to his death, because I went out there in February, and he died in May. I can't believe it's 7 years. And I went out there to thank him. I went out there to thank him for the life that he'd given me. How do you say thank you to the man that gave you the key to living? And I went out there and I looked him in his eye and I told him how much I loved him and how much I cared about what he had given to me. And he said, "Partner, I know." He said, I've carried this thing for almost 30 years, and I guess my time's done. He said, "Now it's your turn." He told me not to water it down and to get along with Calvin. Calvin and I had a kind of a love-hate relationship going. He always was on my time for some reason. But Calvin and I were good friends in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that man, Jim Shaw, taught us what it meant to be an AA member. If you're brand new here tonight and you're uncertain, my prayer for you is that you find out, are you not one of us? And if you are one of us, then the further prayer is that you get busy in this program called Alcoholics Anonymous. There's no quick fix here. It's a design for living. We have to live it. We have to practice these principles. You've got a great group. Just join in. Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to share.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.